Hello, everybody. Welcome to Show Me the Meaning, Wisecrack's movie podcast.
Show me the meaning!
And happy Patty's Day, I guess, right? Like, I'm a day ahead, so it's not St. Patrick's Day here, but for you, it's Patty's Day, right?
It is. It's Patty's Day in the colonies.
Patty's Day. St. Patty's Day for some of us.
Yes, well, so happy Patty's St. Patrick's Day for those of you that care. For those of you that don't care, that's cool. We're going to talk about movies today. I'm joined by the Show Me the Meaning crew. We've got Raymond.
Hey, everybody. Happy to be here.
And joining us, we've got Michael Burns.
Feels so good to be back with you all. Excited for this.
It's been a while since we've talked movies with Michael. I'm excited about this. So this week, we're doing something that we'd been hesitant to do for a little bit about addressing a Wes Anderson film.
Addressing?
Addressing. Yeah, okay, like it's a scandal. Like we've been trying to not touch it. Investigating. But no, because we're kind of like, is there or is it just all style and no substance? But I think there's a lot of there, and especially in this film, which is an adaptation of a Roald Dahl classic childhood novel, Fantastic Mr. Fox from 2009. It stars all the usual suspects from a Wes Anderson film, plus George Clooney and Meryl Streep. So that should give you an idea of who's involved. Do you say starring, by the way, when it's voice acting? Like, would I say I starred in a film as a voiceover actor?
Yeah,
you do,
absolutely.
right?
I think you would, yeah.
Okay, so they're still starring.
Star.
Yeah, and
I think
George Clooney's voice is clearly star.
absolutely,
quality.
yeah. I was gonna say that's one of the things that I was reading. Matt Zoller cites his book, the Wes Anderson collection, and his interview about Fantastic Mr. Fox with him in that. He asked him, was George Clooney just one of those guys you really wanted to work with? He said, yeah, pretty much. You know, there's some aspects that he shares with Fantastic Mr. Fox, but the real magic is just in that voice. He said once he started recording him, he was like, yeah, this is just absolute pay dirt right here.
Yeah. I totally forgot that Meryl Streep was in this movie because I hadn't seen it since like it came out or whatever, and it was just a shock. To be
it was
of
supposed to be Kate Blanchett, I believe.
Oh, really?
See, that's more of a Wes Anderson regular.
Yeah. So let's go around and do some first impressions here. Let's start with Michael. What was the first time you saw this film? What was it like revisiting it, and what was it like watching it at 1.25 speed?
Great. Oh man, you just snitched on me. The first time I watched this, I think I liked it. 2009, I was very much feeling like a Twee Wes Anderson vibe. I think at that point in my life, I even was like, Fantastic Mr. Fox's fashion. I was like, I like, the cut of this guy's jib. I like his style. I like how he moves through the world. I think I liked it, but I didn't love it when I first saw it. And, for me, this comes in a period, and we'll probably get to this. I am a pretty big Wes Anderson defender. I think this film comes at the tail end of his down period. Tail end, no pun intended. So I think it was at a time where I was skeptical about the last couple of films Wes Anderson had made. I was curious about the choice to make a film in this style and veer away from live action. Rewatching it, I just found it fucking delightful. I had a really nice time watching it, and I think watching it detached from the stakes I would normally project onto a Wes Anderson film made it a better time for me. And I think I kind of lowered both like the aesthetic and maybe like kind of emotional stakes of it. But yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. And I think for me, it's a movie that it just has one simple idea, and it explores one simple idea in a fun and entertaining way. In my mind, I'm sure you all will tell me why it explores 19 interrelated ideas that mine the unconscious. But yeah, but for me, I'm into it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Raymond, what about you, brother?
I think it's a really fun movie. I like a lot of Wes Anderson's work. But I would actually agree with Michael that this seems to be a little bit of a turning point. Maybe not so much a turning point as just like, I always think of this movie as kind of the one where he got his groove back a little bit. Because I thought Life Aquatic and Darjeeling Limited do fall more on the style side of things than the substance side of things. It's not that there isn't some good stuff in there, but I think that he got to a point where he was just kind of like, there's some frames in Darjeeling Limited, as attentively detailed and crafted as that film may be, where it just feels like he's trying to cram as much shit as possible into the frame. And this one definitely feels like not only an interesting distillation of his style, but because it's tailored for, you know, a 4-quadrant audience, because it's aimed at kids a little bit, I think it's to the film's credit. He keeps it a little bit simpler. You know, it's not as esoteric as a lot of his other films are. It's a little bit easier to follow. It's much more straightforward. Like Michael said, it's got one idea. It plays it to the hilt. And the characters are clear. It's fun. It's funny and engaging. Do I think it's his best movie? No, but I think it's a really interesting one in his filmography.
I mean, maybe one of the reasons why, and we can talk about this on the other side of the recap, is that it's an adaptation of a story by a very accomplished storyteller who writes very simple, accessible, but very sort of rich stories for, I would say, for kind of all audiences, right? Like, I can still read a Roald Dahl novel and really enjoy the crap out of them. So I've only seen this film twice. I saw it when it first came out, and I too had a sort of like moment of Twee sensibility, and so I saw this around that same time, and then I watched it last night. And listen, when I first saw it, I think I bought into the hype because I was like, oh, this is a Wes Anderson film, and so I really loved it, actually. But it was more like, I think I loved it because I was just trying to be cool within like hipster Twee kind of communities and cultures, and that's like what you're supposed to say. Of course you love Wes Anderson, and of course you love Zooey Deschanel, and, you know, of course you love those things because that's just part of the world. But to be honest, like, I watched it last night and I was kind of like, yeah, it's good. Like, it's fine. Like, it's an enjoyable film. I'm glad it exists. I actually do think there's a lot of richness there. I think when people talk about the kind of Wes Anderson style over substance thing, I think they really miss out on a lot of what it is that he's exploring. He reminds me, it's not the same, but somebody like Miyazaki, who is really sort of just enchanted with childhood and that battle between adulthood and youth and things like that. And this film is also about like consumerism. I mean, Anderson famously said that this film was communist. So sorry out there to you know, Mr. Who was it? Mr. like Naked Pants or whatever it was.
Mr. I Hate Austin. Yeah, I don't know who it was.
He challenged me. A guy challenged me to do one episode without talking about capitalism and communism, and he said he'd buy me a beer if I did it. And so last week I did. And so I'm like, yo, where's my beer? But this week the challenge is over because Wes Anderson himself said it was a communist film. So, I mean, we can talk about that. And so I think and there's some existentialist themes, you know, definitely, about like, I am what I am. I mean, there's stuff like that. But I even think that the style itself is actually really rich and worth exploring. So I don't want to sound like I'm down on the film, but I love like Life Aquatic, and I love the Royal Tenenbaums. And so I love some of his other films, whereas this one I'm kind of like, yeah, it's good and it's enjoyable and I'm glad it exists. And if I ever have children, I would love for them to watch something like this, but yeah. Okay, so before we jump into the film, let's just do a quick recap for y'all. Basically, while raiding a farm early on in the film, Mr. Fox and his wife Felicity are captured. In the cage, she reveals that she's pregnant and fed up with his life of crime and asks him to find a new career. He agrees. Fast forward 2 years later, 12 Fox years, the Foxes are living in a hole with their son, Ash. Mr. Fox has gone straight and is now a newspaper columnist, but he's tired of living in a hole, so he decides to move his family into a lovely tree, but it's in the middle of a quite dangerous area, in the vicinity of 3 feared farmers, Bogus, Bunce, and Bean. Soon after, Felicity's nephew comes to stay with the fam, Christopherson, and Ash finds his cousin pretty much insufferable, mainly because Christopherson is better than Ash at just about everything, and everybody loves Christopherson. So Mr. Fox, however, longing for his days as a thief, he and his possum friend decide to get back into some criminal activities, and they steal produce and poultry from all 3 farmers for 3 straight nights. The farmers, of course, get pissed, and they decide to try to kill Mr. Fox, but they only manage to shoot off his tail. The farmers do, however, destroy the site of the treehouse while Fox and the crew dig underground to safety. And while underground, Felicity learns of Mr. Fox's thievery and life of crime and gets all upset about his reversion back to that old world. Mr. Fox then starts to begin to rally the other local animals whose homes have also been destroyed by the farmers, and so he leads them on a mission to take from the rich and give to the poor. That is, take from the farmers and give to the local animal families. Christopherson ends up getting captured by the farmers, however, and he's used as bait to lure the bandits into an ambush. Mr. Fox surfaces and fights Rat, and before dying, Rat tells of Christopherson's location. And as the farmers are preparing for an ambush, the animals anticipate it, and Fox and crew are able to enter into the farm and free Christopherson, and then they all escape safely. The film ends with the animals settling into their new home in the sewers, where all are free to come and hang with one another. And we close with Fox and fam raiding a grocery store that belongs to the farmers, with Felicity revealing that she is pregnant again, and so everyone dances in the aisles of the store. Finn. Okay, before we get into the show, we got to give a quick shout out to our sponsor for this episode, Skillshare. We've talked about Skillshare a lot on this podcast. We love them. They are an online learning community where you can connect with other like-minded people and creatives, and where you can explore projects that you're passionate about, especially while things are difficult and we're isolated right now and in lockdown. It's so good to be able to have these types of online communities. This is why Skillshare is so cool. You can unleash your creativity and pursue passions right from the convenience of your home. They offer thousands of classes for creative and curious people on topics such as iPhone photography, drone filming, editing, classes on improving productivity, video for IG, artivism, that is creating inspiring art for social change. The one that really gets me excited, I'm actually going to do it this week, is classes on improving productivity. I feel like you can always, as a creative, read a book or take a class or have a conversation with somebody that just fires you up, that stokes you to remind you of why you're doing what you're doing and how it's actually awesome to do the things that you love to do. And so this class is so cool because it's a way to help you, to give you some practical steps to improve productivity so you can actually do the things that you want to do. So to explore your creativity and connect with some cool people, go to Skillshare.com/SMTM. That's Skillshare.com/SMTM, as in show me the meaning. Skillshare.com/SMTM, and you get a free trial of their premium membership. So that's Skillshare.com/SMTM, or click a link in the show notes. So, all right, first things first. The really heavy, thick theme of this film is it's like a Robin Hood tale, right? Rob from the rich,
sure,
give to the poor. So what is our obsession with Robin Hood films? Why do we love the Robin Hood story so much? They're always so popular too. Like my favorite Disney film, I know it's totally like not cool to say, but is the 1970s Robin Hood Disney film, The Fox, who also was a fox, right? I love it. So what's the deal with like Robin Hood? Why do we love Robin Hood stories so much?
I mean,
Michael, what do you got?
Well, I don't know. Is it because in our normal lives, if there is such thing, if we'll say this is real, like a cultural superego or dominating ideology, it's one that makes us feel like we don't have power in our hands. We don't have someone who's looking out for us. And when I say us, those of us that aren't like mega rich, wealthy, or powerful. So that the allure of the Robin Hood myth is the idea that there is an element, a person, a subject in society, in a place whose sole purpose is the redistribution of wealth to the masses, to the people, this sort of like for the people figure. And I think that's something we want. I mean, even going back to like, and it's not quite the same, but like a Spartacus type figure, even this one individual that represents all of us having better lives, someone that's looking out for the little people, all that sort of stuff. That's what I would think. There's something to be said for that idea.
Yeah, it's nice to think that there's like some kind of corrective energy that's like waiting to be activated out there. But I think it is very telling that even nestled within that, though, it's still reliant on the individual as like a figurehead. Mm-hmm. I think the other thing too about this movie specifically is that while Robin Hood certainly took a lot of risks in his own story, Mr. Fox really like he swings for the electric fences in this one. Like they follow him for better and worse and worse and worse. So there is a little bit of balance to that. I do understand it as I appreciate the sentiment of the collective, obviously, but at the end of the day, they still, I think Wes Anderson is pretty smart about kind of scrutinizing the individual that they're following.
Yeah, do you think that there's something kind of funny too about how he's just trying to steal some food for his family, and like they're just trying to get like basic survival stuff, and the farmer's like, "We're gonna kill you."
Yeah,
It's like,
I love, that's one of the things that is really there's a really good beat in this when all three farmers are so on board with this. They're all gung-ho about going in there. We're going to uproot the tree. And then when the animals start just burrowing straight into the stockyards and stealing the chickens straight from the farm and stuff, they immediately boomerang on Michael Gambon's character, and they go, "You made it so much worse. This is way worse. We never should have done this. We should have just let him have a few chickens." It's just, I mean, once again.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's kind of a mirror effect happening with those two sort of following Bean's lead. But go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it's also interesting too that like any of those sort of we'll say communist in the more ideological people helping people type sense, the communist elements of it come from this initial desire for sustenance. Like, dude's got to eat.
Yeah.
Dude steals some chickens, but somehow that leads down the rabbit hole. I'll make a huge leap here and say it reminds me a little bit of in Plato's Republic when the Socrates character talks about how like economies and politics build out of simple desires. And as soon as we have some more like nice shit, all of a sudden we're like, ooh, I kind of like that. I want to trade with this person a little bit, but now someone wants to mess with my stuff. Oh, now we have the invention of war. So we kind of see one individual's desire for some tasty chicken, and I'm never going to be mad at that, turn into like a whole new mode of underground animal existence.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting too. I feel like there's this interesting, like these three acts, you could almost say, that are, so you open with Mr. Fox as criminal. And as criminal, there's a little bit of tension with his wife because that's like, those are youthful activities, but I'm pregnant. I need kind of stable domestic stability. I need that. So then there's stage 2, which is, okay, now he's trying to go straight, but there's the secret life of crime. Right, so he's trying to go straight, but there's the secret.
He's kind of scratching an itch a little bit in those scenes.
Yeah, just a little. Yeah, exactly. And she doesn't know about it, so there's still tension. And this is really interesting too, because we can talk about this in the context of Wes Anderson films. He always has perfect form and structure, but chaos right under the surface, or sometimes bursting out, right? Like in Grand Budapest Hotel, it's Ralph Fiennes just getting so angry and dropping fuck every once in a while, and you're like, whoa, this is like a straight-laced, hotel figure. Like, how is he engaging in this type of activity? Like, that seems kind of weird.
There's that
chaos.
one shot that's the perfect illustration of that, where he's totally buttoned down as Edward Norton is reading them the riot act, and then just out of nowhere he goes from 0 to 100 and he races into the background.
Yeah. So that's a very Wes Anderson thing, and the juxtaposition is great, right? So he's holding it all together, and then the way the film ends is it's almost like they've accepted who they are. Mr. Fox is constantly like, I'm a wild animal. This is who I am. And then it's like he's accepting who he is. His wife is kind of, his family is kind of like, they've figured out how to have both. She's pregnant again, and they're very happy about it, and they're dancing about it. But at the same time, they're doing it while doing crime. But so it's kind of like that's the synthesis, right?
There is also a little bit, I don't know if it's maybe subconscious or not, but all of his, I'm a wild animal, it always rings just a tad bit hollow because he's still the guy or Fox rather, who's dressed nice and dapper, and even at the end where they embrace the wilderness or the wild aspects of their nature, it's still set against a backdrop of modernity. Like, it's either the supermarket that they go up and steal from, or it's the modern sewer system that they now live in. There's still this notion of progress and industrialization that, like, it does kind of feel like, the old 45 or 50-year-old who's getting ready to go to a concert and like, yeah, I can rock out like I used to, but maybe I'm going to take a few steps back from the front row.
Yeah, what you're saying there too makes like connects with what Austin was just saying about the Ray Fine character in Grand Budapest, who like yells out "fuck" every now and then. I do like how there's the moments where the animals act like animals, like in that opening scene when they're in the house.
Yes.
He's like eating breakfast, and it's like, oh, this is normal stuff, and then he goes batshit crazy to eat the food, and then his wife at one point is like, "I'm about to be angry," and then slashes his face open.
Yeah.
And then he makes you think a little bit like, and I know this is just Wes Anderson loves these type of characters. It's not too different from like, Royal Tenenbaum, this guy that, has the air of a man of society, but who's just like a reckless bastard underneath, ready at any point to like be exposed, and having that kind of tension between basically people who, and I think this is what Danny Glover calls Royal in the Royal Tenenbaums. He says like, I don't think you're an asshole, just sort of a son of a bitch at the end of the film.
Sure.
And I think Wes Anderson loves son of a bitch characters that we kind of root for, but underneath the surface, a lot of chaos and sort of misplaced desires going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of attention, a lot of attention to decorum, despite their like very,
to hide
very
that,
clear obsessions. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're son of a bitches, but they're not assholes, and that's kind of there's and this might be part of like the twee-ness of Wes Anderson, is that he doesn't really go deep and dark into like the evils of humanity or something like that. It's kind of like, oh, they just kind of suck. They're just kind of sons of bitches. Like even the farmers, like they're doing some pretty crappy stuff, but they're not like presented as evil, right? And that's he doesn't really do that too much. I mean, I guess it depends on how you think. Like, they're trying to kill a guy for stealing some food. That's kind of evil. But they kind of just suck, But they kind of suck in. I mean, I guess it's a children's thing too.
And they're like idiots.
They suck in like
too.
a kid way. Yeah, and they're idiots. But again, that's kind of playful. Like, ooh, look at the dumb guys. Look at the dumb idiots. But again, there's a levity to it rather than like. And I think that's because he always stays at that level. That sort of like. That kind of safe. I don't know if it's safe. Is it childish? What is it? It's that tweenness that people always talk about. And what do we think? Like, what's he doing there? Like in his own character exploration. It's all, I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is maybe an interplay from some of the stuff we're talking about, like the decorum, the civility, people who project an idea of who they want to be. But they have these urges, or in this case, an animal instinct or something. It's funny. This movie, out of anything in his filmography, reminds me most of his first film, Bottle Rocket, because that's his other quasi heist movie. And in that one, it's like, a handful of, it seems to be very sweet young men who just want to be robbers because there's like this cowboy kind of notion surrounding it, and they knock off a bookstore and get like $200 or something, and then they hit the road acting like they're Bonnie and Clyde or whatever. There is this current running through a lot of his stuff, this notion of like, well, I'm either straight-laced or I want to appear to be straight-laced. But I also want to believe that I'm cool, and this is the idea of what's cool. This is what culture has told me is really neat, to be the lone cowboy, like fucking breaking into a cooling storage unit so I can steal from a safe.
Yeah, I mean, do you guys think like, and I guess this relates to the tweeness question, Austin. Do we think he's kind of like copping out by always having characters that are never just truly bad? Because even the worst character in a Wes Anderson movie, we're meant to see like, oh, but they experienced this trauma, but they're really repressing this hurt or negativity or whatever. So even like, the Owen Wilson character in Royal Tenenbaums, total bastard. What's his name again? You're like, yeah, it's just gonna kill me. Yeah, of course. But like, we feel for him by the end, even when he's like doing like weird coke deals with Egyptian art dealers or something and running away. And I wonder, I think for some people, that's what they like about Wes Anderson, that you watch his films and everyone's like kind of relatable and nice, and they're trying their best. And hey, that's what I'm like. I'm going to go listen to Van Morrison B-sides now. But do we think that's him avoiding the potential for like larger stakes in his storytelling and character development by really maybe leaning into some people that are just pieces of shit?
So there's a book by Mark Spitz, who is an author and music journalist. It's called Twee, The Gentle Revolution in Music, Books, Television, Fashion, and Film. And he argues that it is, in fact, that Twee is or was the most powerful youth movement since punk and hip hop. And he basically, this is what he argues the ethics of Twee is: a preference for beauty over ugliness, a sharp, almost incapacitating awareness of darkness, death, and cruelty, which clashes with our steadfast focus on our essential goodness, a tether to childhood and its attendant innocence and lack of greed, the utter dispensing with of the word cool, as it's conventionally known, often in favor of a kind of fetishization of the nerd, the geek, the dork, the virgin, a healthy suspicion of adulthood, an interest in sex, but a wariness and shyness when it comes to the deed, a lust for knowledge, whether it's the sequence of an album, the supporting players in an old Hal Ashby or Robert Altman film, the lesser-known Judy Blume books, or how to grow the perfect purple Italian or Chinese eggplant or orange cauliflower. The cultivation of a passion project, whether it's a band, a zine, an indie film, a website, or a food or clothing company. Whatever it is, in the eye of the Twee, it is a force of good and something to live for. And then he says that throughout this list, that there is actually a political philosophy here. And the political philosophy is anti-greed and suspicious of an adult world that revolves around avarice. And that humanity is aware, the Twee is aware of humanity's capacity for violence and evil, but chooses to be optimistic about human nature nonetheless. And so he thinks there's a progressive stance to it, but it is a very maybe low stakes choice in the political conflict or the social and ethical landscape. I don't know. What do we think?
Sorry, just unpacking Mark Spitz's brilliance. Also, rest in peace, because I think he's dead. Sorry to make it dark. I did. I brought in the darkness. Yeah, no, I think there's something to that, because even bringing up violence in there, too, because violence is always done. I mean, I would say that's maybe one thing that counteracts what I had just said and what that says about Anderson, where he often does have moments of real violence that pop into sort of like disturb and wake up the audience from the Twee fantasy, whether that's like Richie Tenenbaum slitting his wrist or the shark eating someone in Life Aquatic. I forget, it's eaten by the
Life
shark.
Aquatic, yeah.
But then like thinking about the Twee political philosophy for me reminds me of like well-intentioned people that end up doing nothing and being completely co-opted by systems of power. It even reminds me of like in the recent Adam Curtis, Can't Get You Out of My Head, when he shows this like difference in the early 60s of kind of like radical political movements, often led by marginalized people, and the late 60s, like college students trying to be like good, sweet people who like did community organizing and at night like smoked weed and danced, but then all ended up like becoming players in the system. I don't know. What do you guys think about this Twee political philosophy? I've never thought of it in this way before.
I think in some ways, someone just threw out in the comments here, Jacob B. said, Twee is just the new way for us to survive under capitalism. We return to childhood naive optimism, where our understanding of gender, aesthetic, death, and so on is only in the abstract. I think you might be hitting on something there, because when I hear the word Twee, the very first thing I think of is Urban Outfitters. In a weird way that like the very notion of that has become commercialized or commodified in a certain way. It does seem like a I don't necessarily know that I would brand it with like the woke capitalism distinction or anything like that, but it is sort of like the soft Instagramming of capitalism. It's like the not necessarily the self-help branch of capitalism, but it's associated with that, where it's like it is as much about crafting your personality as it is about feeding a system. Like that's the real sort of lifestyle that's being sold, if that means anything.
See, when I think of Twee, I think of like contemporary, I wonder like movements in like cottagecore, like the cottagecore aesthetic and like the DIY culture and stuff like that. That seems to have a sort of like more contemporary, because Twee has been a term that's been around for what, like 20-ish years, right? So maybe there's
Austin, I wonder if you're describing like second wave Twee, because I wonder if there's like a first wave Twee that was like early 2000s, kind of corny, and if second wave Twee is that, but maybe someone who's a little more aware. They have their garden, they make kombucha, them and their friends
Yeah,
like
yeah,
hang out
yeah.
and do like crafts, and it's all about making stuff and like being involved in the process. You know, like I kind of like that
Yeah.
version better, but I think there's a distinction there.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think that I oftentimes like twee hipster culture gets mocked. But I do think that there's like a sincere expression here. Like when I look at Wes Anderson's films, this is why I don't think it's just style with no substance. I think that there's a genuine sincerity that's really trying to, rather than be critical. And maybe that's what a lot of film people want. They want someone who's going to like make a strong, bold statement about like this thing is good or bad. And he kind of tends to just present these characters that are really quite human, maybe in what we would call low stakes environment, but nevertheless, there are stakes there. You know, there is a little bit of a chaos there. There's like this radical structure that's imposed that is kind of the juxtaposition of the kind of like chaotic underbelly. But that there's something kind of sweet about people struggling, or there's sweet about Mr. Fox trying to understand who he is. There's something sweet about Felicity saying to Fox, hey, you're a criminal. But it's not like he's a mean, hardened criminal. He's kind of like just kind of doing what he's got to do. And she's like, babe, come on. Like, I get it, but I got a kid now, you know? So there's like there's this niceness, there's a sweetness about it, but this calling us to be better people. So I think there is still a challenge that's being invoked in a sort of twee ethos that you see in Wes Anderson's films, you know? People that are either bad people, son of a bitches, or assholes, or people that are kind of like nice. You know, they're just trying to do their damn best, or they're trying to avenge their fallen comrade in The Life Aquatic, right? Like, but there's something sincere about it, at least.
Yeah, at the very least, I think one of the things that runs through most of his films is folks struggling with like their own identity and just how best to express themselves. And I mean, I don't think it would be ungenerous to describe the Royal Tenenbaums as an entire family having an identity crisis at once. Like it's, you know, you do kind of see that stuff run through a lot of his films.
Yeah, I wonder. So there's a quote I liked that I feel like applies to what we're talking about right now. I'm wondering what you guys think about it. But it's a point where the fantastic Mr. Fox says, "Who am I? How can a fox ever be happy without a chicken in its teeth?"
Excuse the expression.
Yeah. But I just like, I don't know. And right before he says that, he says something like, I'm getting I don't know, existential. But that line in particular, I wonder if I'm reading too much into it, but how can a fox ever be happy without a chicken in his teeth? I find really interesting. And a question about,
one, there's
like,
a violence.
nature
There's a
versus
violence. Yeah, and there's a real violence in the imagery, right? Which is why he's like, excuse me, right? Like how can a fox ever be happy without destroying another body by tearing it apart with my sharp teeth in its like soft fleshy limbs? That's really what he's saying. So there's like immediately this violence there, and it's like, how can I be happy without doing that thing? Because that's part of my nature. So there's a sense, and it's like, how can I ever be happy without being true to who I am?
Yeah. But then there's also the fact that because of how he and all the animals in this film are anthropomorphized, there's also this notion of like, this is what he believes a fox to be, maybe because of societal pressure, like within the sort of like themes of this film. That yes, there you can make the natural instinctual argument for it, but he also walks on two legs and wears suits and ties and was carrying a cane and all the concept art and stuff. Yeah. So I see where you're going with that, but I also think that may be, whether intentional or not, it's one of those things that jumps out to me as him reckoning with like the societal pressure of what it means to be a patriarch or a paternal presence, at least in his family's lives, and how best to provide for them, and how to also maintain his own sense of identity while having to give so much over to them as a family and as a provider.
It's interesting too that like it seems to me that in the last third of the film, it is the embrace of animality itself that saves the day. You know, the scene where he like, and I like how he's using all the animals' Latin names, all being like, what can you do? What's your skill? What's your skill? And this idea, in the same way that like,
I'm fast.
Yeah. Explosives, bang, boom, blast. It's like, okay.
Classic Badger move. Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, and I like when Ash, the son, who I think is voiced by Jason Schwartzman. Well, you know, the whole film, he's just like, I want to be an athlete. Am I an athlete? Do you see me as an athlete? Am I big? And in the last bit, how does he save the day? By saying, I'm small. And it's a sort of embrace of the animality, embrace of like this like natural aspects gets them somewhere, which I thought was like a nice, not resolution, but nice way to play out that tension between like the animal existence and the societal existence that we see in Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yeah, it is a real existential crisis too. Like, it is a real existential crisis that Mr. Fox is going through, which is kind of nice. Like, he's really, like, this goes to like Raymond's point. I think he actually is kind of like, shoot, like, what does it really mean to be a friggin' fox, man? I want to tear some chickens apart, but maybe that desire itself has been manufactured. Maybe I shouldn't want to live a life where I'm eating some chickens and tearing them apart. And what would that look like? Could I do that? Like, would I even be me? Like, is it possible? I don't know. I think that's kind of deep, man.
Yeah, I used to live next to a really good fried chicken place when I lived in Baltimore. And when I moved away, I thought, am I still me if I'm not eating fried chicken with honey hot sauce at 1:30
What is
a.m.?
a Burns without some fried chicken?
Yeah, if I'm not just like assaulting my body with bad cholesterol right before sleep. So I get it. So to me, this was a really relatable film. I was crying throughout.
So what do we think then about Wes Anderson's aesthetic? Like, are we tired of it? Do we dig it? Like, it gets a lot of attention and it's clearly unique. When you see a Wes Anderson film, you show me a trailer, I know that it's a Wes Anderson film. There's literally nobody like him. There are a couple people who try to emulate it in certain projects here and there, but not even real copycats. Like, what do we think of his style?
The trailer for his newest film is the most Wes Anderson thing I think I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I mean,
I kind of like though because he's like leaning into it. It's like he's like accelerating his Wes Andersonism. I kind of dig it.
Yeah, I to answer your question though, Austin, I think it takes all kinds of kinds. You know, we've got Wes Anderson over in his corner doing his thing. He's gonna inspire some folks to ape him, some folks to hate him, but. Hey, I think that the American film landscape is all the richer for having more and more unique voices out there trying their own style.
Yeah, it's like you said, Austin. Like, you can always tell when you see a Wes Anderson, film. I mean, how many filmmakers left that make movies that are put in cinemas across the country are made by filmmakers who are writing and directing their own films, and you can tell it's them within 3 seconds. And I feel like we're moving away from that really aggressively. There's only a few people like that, and I think whether you love him or hate him, I think that's valuable and a valuable part of like the cinema community. And if you're like a young person who wants to make films, it's still the sort of person you can look at and be like, this is some fucking dude from Austin, Texas, who just started making movies with his friends and made movies that weren't about popular themes, weren't about the things you were supposed to make a movie about, but has really found a lane. So even if you like fucking hate his movies, it's an interesting creative trajectory he's taken.
I think I remember reading something that like Quentin Tarantino became aware of what directing was because he saw Sergio Leone do the same thing in 2 different movies, and he was like, "Oh, that's what a director does."
Wow.
And I think there is something to that if you can isolate that notion that there is someone behind the camera, a team of people who are making these choices, who are bringing these things to life. You know, when I was a kid, I would turn on a movie and you just think like, "Oh yeah, they just roll a camera and these people say their lines." You don't think about the wardrobe, the set design, and what have you. But when you do have big, bold, visionary filmmakers, even if they're not necessarily for you, I think it does help open people's minds and inspire them to think about film as a craft, not necessarily just as entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if it's true, and this just came to my mind. I wonder, there are some filmmakers that seem to inspire laterally. And what I mean is like someone like Martin Scorsese is somebody who inspires people that are of his age and even people who are older than him. And they're like, oh, fuck, like I gotta learn from this guy. I feel like Wes Anderson has maybe more of like a downward influence. And what I mean by that is like people that are younger. And so I wonder if we're only just now starting to get to the age where the filmmakers who might be more apparently inspired by or influenced by Wes Anderson are going to start creating that kind of content. But we might not see it in the auteur sense, but we might see it in like Twee 2.0, right? Like second wave Twee Netflix series, or is like the meta modern, like new sincerity stuff, is that going to enfold some of Wes Anderson's influence? But it feels like Zoomers, millennials who are now maybe older millennials, they're the ones who are going to start kind of making more stuff that has the fingerprints you know?
I think that Wes Anderson's style has been pretty effectively absorbed in a lot of what you might call like the Sundance type movie, you know, the Junos and the Little Miss Sunshines of the world. Not to say that those movies are totally derivative or anything. I think they have their merits. But I think there are a lot of movies that have already adopted aspects of his style, whether it's the planimetric framing or the very bright compositions, the really bright, snappy wardrobe. I remember an interview with Edgar Wright where he said something to the effect of he always wants his characters to be easy to draw for the fans. That if you can imagine one of his characters, you should be able to imagine a key piece of wardrobe or something like that. I think Wes Anderson is one of the standard bearers of that approach, that he has these sort of indelible character designs that sometimes paper over the fact that his characters are sometimes kind of caricature-y more so than actual real humans.
Yeah, I think he's had like an interesting influence as well, like outside of cinema, in spaces like I don't know, like even the show what's it called, How To with John Wilson, recent HBO show.
Sure.
That's like a documentary thing, with the way in which this John Wilson guy looks at New York City and embraces like the quirkiness and the people that are living like their alternative lives, I think is something that has some Wes Anderson DNA in it. And I'm embarrassed to bring this up because I'm currently wearing a piece of his merch right now on my head. But, comedian Joe Pera and his show Joe Pera Talks With You on Adult Swim, which everyone should watch if you haven't watched it. It's so good. But it's super twee in a sense in that it's earnest. The characters have a lot of their own individual quirks. It's set in like, you know, a random town in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And it embraces a weirdness and a sweetness that I do think like comes from that Wes Anderson DNA.
Shout out to a lot of the Connor O'Malley on that show.
Oh my God. Anything Connor O'Malley does, I will die for.
But sorry for cutting you off, Michael.
No, I'm just screaming about Connor O'Malley. But all I was saying before is like some of the films you mentioned before, what you said, like Juno and Little Miss Sunshine, right? Films, did I enjoy those when I saw those in the theater and maybe afterwards? Sure. Will I ever watch either of those movies again in my fucking life? I truly don't know. But I know I'm going to watch probably every Wes Anderson film a few more times, some more than others, from here until I eventually die for Connor O'Malley's art.
Okay, so what is it that you love about him so much? Yeah, like
Speaking of his style, before we move on, I just want to say San Wit in the chat says all three of them look the same, referring to the three of us. This video looks like it is directed by Wes Anderson. Just saying. And then a little nail painting emoji. She's kind of dunking on us there.
I mean, you're not wrong even a little bit at all. It's three different versions of the same thing. It'd be like if you got three vanilla shakes, but one was like vanilla malt and one was like vanilla that has like some sea salt and one was classic vanilla. It's still three fucking vanilla shakes, you know?
Well, I would be only so happy for us to be considered the next the Wilson brothers. I think Luke, Owen, and Andrew, they got nothing on us.
Wow, the third, every brother pair always has a third that no one knows who they really are, like the Hemsworths. You know, you have like brother 1A and 1B, and then just this random dude. We're like, who are you? Why are you at this premiere? Where's your pass?
Well, aren't there like
Andrew
four
never
Baldwins?
really took
The
off,
Baldwins
but
have two that are kind of like, huh?
Don't they have like 9 of them total? Those, you know, reproducing mix.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
My favorite is the evangelical one who was in Biodome. He's my favorite.
Uh-huh. Oh yeah. But so I guess real quick, just to say, like, I don't know. I think one of the reasons that I like Wes Anderson over time is the same reason why we eat the same dishes over time. The same reason why occasionally I order a beer that I've had a million times, whatever, because I know what it is. It has its own character, its own perspective, and it's not going to like change my life. I don't expect, like, whenever French Dispatch comes out, I don't expect to leave the theater being like, wow, I saw something completely new. Wow, my eyes have been opened up to a new possibility in storytelling. But I'm going to feel like that was a good hang. I spent 90 to 120 minutes in a world that Wes Anderson created that probably doesn't remind me of anything else that's out right now, that also features performances from people that I like because they go all in on his thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely know what you're getting with a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah.
That's the one thing. I was watching a little like video essay on Wes Anderson, and I was thinking about how he gets the actors to buy in to just the vibe of what he's doing, right? Like it's a little bit over the top sometimes and kind of cartoony, but it never feels outlandish. It never feels off pitch. But the fact that he's able to get people from Willem Dafoe, whose character in Life Aquatic is fantastic, to Ralph Fiennes, to the kind of eccentric roles that you have in some of his it's impressive that he gets these people to just buy in, and he got Meryl Streep in Fantastic Mr. Fox. Now I know you don't see her face, but again, there's something kind of amazing about him being able to be like, okay, Queen Meryl, can you just buy into this fun project for me?
Or fucking Bill Murray, who doesn't have an agent, doesn't do anything, but Wes Anderson writes him a fucking postcard, and Bill Murray's like, yeah, where do I go?
Yeah, where do I go?
And I just think, once again, I'm not trying to do some weird Murray obsession. He's fine, but it's just interesting that someone with that much cachet at this point in his career, Wes Anderson's one of the maybe three, I guess, him, Jim Jarmusch, and maybe Sofia Coppola, or three people that Bill Murray, picks up the phone for.
It is. And not only that, but if you watch the behind the scenes on Fantastic Mr. Fox, Bill Murray was hanging out with Wes Anderson throughout production. He would just show up randomly to see how things are coming along. He seems to be really invested in their creative partnership.
That's fun.
That is fun. Okay. Final thoughts before we jump into the mailbag. Anything to say? Do we love it? Leave it? See it? What do we think? Raymond?
I think it's a good picture. If you like Wes Anderson's whole vibe, you'll probably enjoy it. If Wes Anderson annoys you, this one will probably annoy you.
Yeah, if you don't like Wes Anderson, don't watch it. If you can deal with him, even tolerate him, it's a good hang. It's a good hang. And I would think, especially if I had children and wanted to watch something with my kids that they would enjoy, that I would like to, this one really hits a sweet spot there. So those of you with kids, watch it with them and report back.
Awesome. Okay, so now we're going to jump into the mailbag. We're going to answer some voicemails first, and then I'll try to get to a couple of emails. If you want to call in and talk to us about why you love Wes Anderson, what you think about Twee culture, if you are yourself a part of Twee culture, tell us, is there a stage 2? Is there a second wave of Twee? Inform us. Let us know what is going on in the world at the moment. You can call us at 1-213-534-8807. That's 1-213-534-8807. The first voicemail that we're going to look at is from Jacob, who wants to chat about Hook. Go ahead, Jacob.
Jimmy, me, Wisecrack crew, Jacob calling again. I know it's been a long time since I left a voicemail for you guys, but you had such a great lineup of movie reviews. I just had to call in on Hook. Hook is probably one of my favorite movies. I'm calling in because after this rewatch, I realized one thing: mortality versus death. Honestly, in the film, there's a lot of symbolism of mortality and death than in the original Peter Pan movie or book, depending on which one you are. You have Hook, which gets ironically killed by the crocodile, who he says he stuffed into a clock, which is the symbol of death for him. You have the Peter Pan sword, which Davio's character, or Dante Bosco's character, gets killed by a sword by Captain Hook, I believe. And then you have the food scene of where they're eating nothing but food, and they have to imagine food to eat. I just want to know what you guys honestly thought about the relationship between the original book and any interpretations of Peter Pan with life and death, and if this interpretation really hammers home life and death, since Neverland's a place where you never age or you really never die. So hey, thanks guys. I hope you're staying safe during all this craziness and all the weather.
Awesome. Yeah, and that really sort of exacerbates the point that Raymond brought up about how they just do Rufio dirty, right? If no one ever dies in Neverland and he gets freaking murdered, that should even be more of a chaotic moment or more of a traumatic experience, but it seems to be kind of brushed over. So what do you think?
There is that, but the other side of that argument, to argue against myself essentially, is that because no one dies in Neverland, they do have... At one point, I remember in that movie, Robin Williams asks Rufio, he goes, what, where are your parents, where's your mother, what do you do? And Rufio just kind of shrugs and goes, we kill pirates. And that's like,
Yeah.
I think that's kind of the nasty side of eternity or eternal life sort of rearing its ugly head, that like, what do you do when you never age? Do you get bored? And when you get bored, do you have to just like gin up these like acts of aggression against the weird adults on the other side of the island to all play pirate all day while you guys are playing like Swiss Family Robinson? So that is something that just sort of popped off in my head when that voicemail came in. I like the notion that they do just have to manufacture these weird little skirmishes because it's the only thing that can keep their attention.
Burns, have you seen Hook in a while? I know you weren't here last week, but
Yeah, I have not seen it in a while, like the movie, but do not feel like it's worth the time to have me weigh in on it.
Right on. Let's jump into our second voicemail. We have Quinn, who wants to talk about The Thing. Go ahead, Quinn.
Hey, Show Me the Meaning crew. This is Squin calling about The Thing, my favorite horror movie. I enjoyed your discussion about the possible motivations or thought processes of The Thing, and I thought you might be interested in a little short story written by Peter Watt called The Thing, which is essentially a fan fiction short story told from the perspective of The Thing, retelling the events of the movie. And in this case, The Thing seems to actually kind of be as horrified of us as we are of it when it realizes that we are not a collective consciousness and are individuals. It is disgusted by the thought, and it's kind of pitying us and trying to fix us. So check that out if you're interested. There's a really good audio version of it as well. Keep up the good work. I know you're done with Carpenter, but I would love to hear you talk someday about Prince of Darkness and In the Mouth of Madness. All right, peace.
Interesting.
I have never read that. I'll have to check that out. That sounds interesting.
Yeah, I love the idea that it pities us, and in a way it's like trying to convert us. Like it doesn't see what it's doing as being violent. It's a sort of colonial logic, you might say, right? It doesn't necessarily presume that what it's doing is evil. It's trying to just expand itself through conversion or through appropriation or something along those lines. But of course, in so doing, it destroys our bodily form. So, interesting.
Well, then there's the other side of that one that, as he said, maybe it sees the men in the Arctic outpost as being divided, as being tribal, as being, riven by their own sort of like individual paranoia and stuff. It actually, when we were listening to that voicemail just now, it actually reminded me of Fantastic Mr. Fox, how sometimes you get those wide landscape shots of all the burrowing and it just looks like an ant colony. And you do get this notion that they're all working together, they're working collectively towards something. But of course, above ground, a few people have to suffer some lost chickens.
Awesome. Let's get into the next one. We've got Jason, who also wants to talk about Hook. What's up, Jason?
Hey, Wisecrack. This is Jason from Arizona. I wanted to call in about Hook. I'm really glad that you guys were talking a lot about Spielberg as a whole, because I think personally the most interesting thing about Hook is to look at its place in his filmography, where it kind of is like the midpoint, like turning point right before he was about to go off and be like the dramatic Oscar-winning director for Schindler's List and Saving Private Ryan and Lincoln and Munich and those types of movies, coming off of being the family and whimsy and adventure director. And Hook is just this kind of flawed, although enjoyable, like mix of those two, where it's very cynical and dour at times. Obviously, Robin Williams is playing the straight man, but it's all about rediscovering the whimsy, and it is just very interesting in his filmography, because I think you can maybe project some of that onto Spielberg himself as like this guy who everyone saw him as the child trapped in a man's body, of tapping into that childlike wonder, but who saw himself as more cynical and growing up and wanting to reconnect to his youth. And so I think it's kind of fascinating to take that and stride with all the movies he's made and that, the benefit of hindsight, getting to look back. So I'm glad that you guys are talking about that, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate that point. Thanks a lot for the podcast. Really loving it. Take care.
If there were one Steven Spielberg film and you could only talk about one film to talk about, not to watch, but to talk about, what one would you want to choose, do you think? I mean, to watch, Michael? If I was only going to watch one Steven Spielberg film ever again, for me, it would be Jurassic Park. I would want to watch Jurassic Park.
That would be my answer for both. I think Jurassic Park is the best thing he's ever been a part of and one of the most underrated films in the Western canon.
Which is funny because it's not really underrated. Right?
But I still think it's underrated.
Actually, Raymond made this point last week. He said that he thinks that Steven Spielberg is actually underrated as a director, even though he's
in some ways,
one of the most.
I think in some ways,
he's one of the most celebrated directors.
I think if anyone, the one I always come back to is Bridge of Spies, as far as his late career output is concerned. If any other filmmaker in Hollywood had made that movie, they would have been nominated for Best Director. It would have been nominated for Best Picture, no doubt in my mind. I don't know if he was nominated for either one of those. I don't think that he was. But it's just one of those movies that from Spielberg, you're like, yeah, that's what he does. He makes great movies. All right, moving on. Like, whatever. For me, I think Jaws, I couldn't live. That's the one Spielberg movie I can't imagine never watching again. And to Jason's point, I think he's onto something interesting here. But if I had to pinpoint a moment where Spielberg kind of turned the corner from like standard bearer of the film brat movement to being like the sort of cinema's elder statesman, it would probably be the founding of DreamWorks. Like when he had an entire studio at his disposal and he became a studio boss, I think it's pretty telling that the first movies that he produced under that shingle were like Amistad, Saving Private Ryan, Artificial Intelligence, I think Minority Report, Catch Me If You Can. Like, their tones vary, but I think that if you look at his DreamWorks output, especially early on, there's some stuff peppered in at other studios like Indiana Jones 4 and Jurassic Park 2. But for the most part, it seems like he made a very deliberate effort once he was calling the shots to focus in on more adult-oriented, more Oscar-friendly fare. But I think he's onto something with Hook being right in that same sort of era, the 90s there.
Cool. Yeah, so if you want to tune in, remember you can, not tune in, if you want to chime in, you can call us at 1-213-534-8807. You can leave us a voicemail and we'll get into it in the coming weeks. I do want to just quickly jump into the email mailbag, because if you can't call us or if you would prefer not to, you can email us at movies@wisecrack.co. That's movies@wisecrack.co. Now, both of these are just recommendation emails, really. So I'll start with Nick, who says, hello, SMTM crew. I was listening to your episode on The Thing, and Austin mentioned how he loves ambiguous endings because it leaves much to be discussed. This reminded me of Lee Chang-dong's amazing film Burning. I would love to hear SMTM crew discuss this movie. P.S. I think it's kind of funny that Austin left Orange County to move to Australia, which is kind of like a giant orange county. Yes, Nick, that irony is not lost on me. Raymond, Michael, are you familiar with Burning, and what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a good film. Features Stephen Yeun, nominated this year for Minari in the Best Actor category. It is a slow burn, if you'll pardon the pun. I mean, it takes its time and it plays its cards pretty close to the chest up through the ending in a way that, on a first watch, might be a little bit frustrating. At least it was for me. But as I've sort of reflected on it, I'm really excited to revisit it soon, especially in light of his historic nomination. I think he's the first Asian man to be nominated for Best Actor at the Oscars.
Yeah, no, I've never seen it, but Nick sounds like someone I can trust, so I'm going to put that on the to watch list.
And then the last thing we'll get into is Kevin, who just quickly has a recommendation for a director. Hey guys, I hope you're doing well, and I just wanted to say I'm really enjoying the newish team of Austin, Ryan, and Raymond since last summer. Given the recent discussion about potential movie directors to focus on, I wanted to resend the email below about Richard Linklater. I understand he probably isn't everyone's style, but he's my personal favorite director of all time for his original works rather than his adaptations. There's more details about why in this other longer email. But yeah, so what do you think about Linklater? I kind of forget about Linklater, but that actually does excite me because I don't believe we've done a Linklater film and I would kind of enjoy doing something from maybe the trilogy or something like that. I don't know. What do you guys think?
He kind of rips, man. I do think Linklater rips, and I get another Austin filmmaker like Wes Anderson. I'll assume that they're buds and hang out. But yeah, man, I mean, I think like Everybody Wants Some was so overlooked and one of like the best kind of like comedies of the past 10 years. So good. The trilogy's good. I still stand for Boyhood more than I'd like to admit. I don't know.
It's great.
I actually think a lot of the same stuff I would say about why I like Wes Anderson is why I like Richard Linklater. He has a vision. He does his own thing. He has certain actors he likes to work with. And I kind of know what I'm getting into when I go into the theater and I see a Linklater film. So yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just play.
And I'm a bit obsessed with mumblecore, stripped down. Just put a camera in front of some actors, let them improvise, let them have just a relationship story unfold before your eyes. That's 100% my vibe.
Yeah.
So
that's also a filmmaker that seems like he would be up Ryan's alley. We should bring that up to Ryan. Mm-hmm. And Linklater, apropos of Spielberg, I think he's another filmmaker that is very good at oscillating between really serious-minded art house type movies like the Before Sunrise, Sunset trilogy, stuff like Boyhood, and he knocks it out of the park whenever he does studio stuff like School of Rock. I think that's a really fun family film.
Cool. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get out of here. Where can people find you on the internet so they can debate with you about movies and stuff, Raymond?
Actually, this week I have a couple of things to plug. If you want a double dose of me talking about movies in your podcast feed this week, I had the pleasure of joining Jack Packard and Darren Mooney over on the Escapist Movie Podcast. We talked about the Oscar nominees had just been announced the day that we recorded, so most of the conversation is built around that, but we also get into film culture more broadly. We talk about Zack Snyder, Justice League, and all that. Fiasco, masterpiece, who knows? But it was a really fun conversation. I was so pleased to be a guest on their show. So check that out if you're interested. That's the Escapist Movie Podcast. And on a more serious note, I do just want to plug Red Canary Song. They're a grassroots coalition of Chinese massage parlor workers who are organizing transnationally to protect the rights of Asian women and sex workers. I just wanted to bring some attention to them. They've been doing good work in their field. They could really benefit from some donations right now, especially after what happened yesterday in Georgia.
All right. And Michael, what about you, brother?
Oh, Raymond just said such great and real things. I'm just Michael O. Burns on most social media. Just come and tell me why you think I'm stupid. I don't care.
A phenomenal Twitter follow, my friends.
Absolutely.
And a chaotic Twitter follow, probably, but it's fine. I've only had 3 relatives call my mom at various points and say, I got on Twitter and we saw Michael's account and I'm concerned. And I just have to, Mom, they're old ladies, they don't get it.
Because of your politics or because of your jackass-style intro when you're about to skateboard down the stairs?
Maybe that. I don't know. Sometimes it's just sometimes you got to tweet things like, I'll give anyone oral that shows up at my house with some waffle fries right now. And I don't know if I would do that or not, but you say it, and then a 72-year-old person says, I think Michael's up to some stuff.
Yeah, I love when you talk to people who either don't quite get Twitter, and they think that when you say something, they're like, what were you saying? And I'm like, honestly, I don't even remember. I was probably just responding to some trending thing. So whatever. Yeah. Anyway, Raymond, send us out, man. I know. Send us out, brother.
Live from the burrow beneath the farms of Bogus Bunsen Beans, it's Show Me the Meaning.
Yeah.